Hi everyone, in this video we're going to look at the ground penetrating radar data collected on this site just here on the corner of Barry and Main Streets in Romsey. We'll flick across to near map so we can get a better image of what we're looking at. So this is the site here on the corner, and for as long as I've seen this site it hasn't been a survey, but there's evidence of it. So on these raised concrete plinths there's some evidence of some Bowser positions. So I'll bring up an image of the GPR, or ground penetrating radar, and it's got the GPS mounted on top for positional data. And basically what it is, kind of looks like a lawnmower, and you push it along, it sends a signal into the ground, and it's looking or listening for reflections. And we can interpret different things from those reflections. The reflections it bounces off of pipes, trenches, large objects in the ground such as tanks, and those are the types of things that I'm interested in looking for on this particular site. Being an old servo site or a fuel site, there's got to be some tanks or excavations where some tanks were. If we go back in time as far as we can see the building was here. Now I'm not sure if this was the building for when it was a server, but it looks like it. And there was a canopy mounted overhead, looks like, from the shadowing. We can see there was a concrete pad just here. Because of this shadowing, there might be a Bowser just there, or maybe a sign. And then we can, out in this paddock here, we can see there's an LPG cylinder above ground. If we scroll forward to today, or the latest imagery that we have, we can see the site's been remediated, sort of, above ground anyway, and they've demolished the building and they've installed a dog wash in the corner, and that's about it. So let's go across to Geolytics, which is the ground penetrating radar data analytics cloud-based software. And here you can see each one of these lines is a pass that I took with the GPR. The pass spacing is about 500 mil, which is about the width of the cart. If we load that near map image in, so the passes are overlaid over the image, we can see the areas that were scanned. So obviously I couldn't scan over the dog wash. Just here, Kim's coffee cart was parked for the day, and I didn't scan this little area out here, and I stopped kind of at the boundary. So let's just talk about the individual pass data and what you see. I've applied some processes to the data, and then let's just load up one of the traces. I know there was a big reflection on these traces just here. And so if you look at this white dot, which is just here, what this is, what you were looking at here, this is the vertical slice of ground as the GPR passes over it. So on the left here, this left-hand scale is depth, and then on the x-axis we've got linear distance. So you can see this white dot overlaid on this pass. As I move my mouse across this radargram to the right, the white dot moves, and it tells you or implies the position. So you can see here there's quite a large reflection, and it's probably about the 700 mil deep point, or maybe a touch less. And then if we navigate our cursor over the top of it and look down in the bottom left where that white dot is, that's about the position. So if we move across to the next trace, and the next one, and the next one, we can sort of see that this reflection is in the same spot at the same depth on multiple passes. So the beauty about this software and software like it is that we can take all of our individual passes and combine them to look at the data together, and we can combine it and scroll through the data at depth. So we've got our background image loaded, the GPR profiles are loaded, and I'm going to enable this slice data here. So I've got my depth increment set to 50 mil. So with this slider here, with each increment of this scale, we can move through the horizontal plane below our feet at 50 mil increments. So here, 100 mil, there's not a lot to see in this area, but here we can sort of start to see, this might be the transition between this grassed area and the hard surface. And as we move deeper, things start to show up. So at 450, you can see a lot of disturbance just here. There's a strong linear reflection sort of just here. We can start to see something appearing just here. There's something just there. That might be a boundary. Maybe that was a footing. Oh no, the building was sort of back here. Yeah, that might be a trench. There's a strong reflection just here, which is the position of which those what's called hyperbola, that upside down sort of boomerang thing we saw on the individual profile, that was right about there. And if we scroll deeper, we can start to see some other things around here, but there's more reflections coming up here. There's a big one here, and we can start to see one here as well showing up, and that aligns with maybe what that is there. So continue scrolling through, and these trenches are showing up very well. So in the old imagery, you can see that LPG bullet tank. This is, I won't say obvious, but we can pretty strongly assume that that's the LPG pipe from the tank to the old Bowser. And there's some other things that we can see here. There's something showing up on this angle. There's a faint line there. And yeah, these two spots are lighting up in quite definitive squares and rectangles. So I would make the assumption that this position here, this one here, and this one here, there are either tanks, or there used to be tanks, because you got to remember that the GPR is just looking at reflections or differences that might be bouncing off. This tank might have been taken out, and this excavation might have been filled with a material that was creating all these reflections. So it's hard to make definitive conclusions from GPR data, but obviously this is telling us a lot, so we can make some pretty strong assumptions. Right about 650, you can see a lot going on right here. So that's the individual horizontal profiles at 50 mil increments. And let me just talk about this for a minute. What that is, and we can see it on the aerial image, and on site, I could see that this is a fill point for the tanks. So it's a metallic cover, or a metallic box. With GPR, if we go to that profile, with GPR, when you run over something metal, you get what's called ringing. So that object isn't actually 2.1 meters deep. If we highlight this profile here, we can see that that's the box there. So the lid is at the top, but due to the metallic makeup of the lid, the signal's just bounced, and it's bounced all the way to the bottom of the reading. It's actually bounced to 4 meters, and will probably continue to. So that's just an anomaly. Like I said, this object isn't actually down to 2.1 or 4 meters deep. So it's just something you have to correct for when looking at GPR data. So that's the individual slice data set increments. But if we turn on multi-slice and look at the settings, what multi-slice is aiming to do is bring all the reflections at different depths to the one plane. And you can specify the minimum and the maximum depth. So we've got 300 mil at the minimum, 1.5 meters at the maximum. So everything in between those depths is trying to show. This one here that we assume that there was a tank here, it's not so clear, but this one here is, and you can see multiple trenches there, sort of one going across here. That might be a fuel line to the Bowser, same as that one there. There's one across there. That might be something. There's something there as well, which we saw before. It looks like there's something maybe out here. Yeah, so there's going to be fill lines from the fill point. If it was a remote fill, which looks like this one was, this one might have had a local fill. There'd be lines to the Bowsers, which looks like maybe what some of these are. And then there's also should have been some vents. So perhaps this line here was a vent. Perhaps not. Might be an electrical trench from the building to the Bowser. What GPR data is doing is purely picking up reflections. It's not telling you what that reflection is. So it's up to you to make the determinations or assumptions regarding what they are. But without the GPR data, there's only so many things you can derive from looking at the surface. So although it's not telling us what those things are, it sure is providing us a lot of information. So yeah, pretty interesting subject site. A lot of information we can derive. So we'll leave it there.